Amelia Earhart was more than just a pilot. She was a symbol of courage, ambition, and determination. In an era when aviation was still in its infancy and women faced significant barriers in many professions, she soared above it all, literally and figuratively. By 1937, she had already broken numerous records, including being the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic. But she wanted more. She wanted to be the first woman to circumnavigate the globe. On July 2, 1937, Earhart and her navigator, Fred Noonan, took off from Lae, New Guinea, on one of the final legs of their journey. Their destination was Howland Island, a tiny speck in the vast Pacific Ocean. It was supposed to be just another flight. Instead, it became one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the modern world. Earhart's plane, a Lockheed Electra 10E, was state-of-the-art for its time. But even the best aircraft had limitations. The journey she and Noonan were attempting required pinpoint navigation. In an age without GPS or modern radar, they relied on celestial navigation and radio transmissions. It was a risky endeavor, one that would test their skill and luck. Before takeoff, Earhart sent a telegram to her husband, George Putnam. Radio misunderstanding and personnel unfitness probably will hold one day. It was a sign that all was not going as smoothly as hoped. But on the morning of July 2, they departed anyway, heading toward their tiny target in the Pacific. The U.S. Coast Guard cutter Itasca was stationed near Howland Island, waiting to guide Earhart in. The plan was simple. As she got close, she would radio her position, and the Itasca would help her land. But something went terribly wrong. At 6:14 a.m., Earhart's voice crackled over the radio. "We are on the line 157-337. We'll repeat message. We will repeat this on 6210. She sounded calm, but her words were worrying. She was unsure of her location. At 7:42 a.m., another transmission came through. "We must be on you, but cannot see you. Gas is running low." At 8:43 a.m., the final confirmed transmission was heard. "We are running north and south." Then, silence. What followed was the most extensive search operation ever conducted at the time. The U.S. Navy and Coast Guard scoured thousands of miles of open ocean. Dozens of ships and aircraft searched for any sign of wreckage. Not a single trace of Earhart, Noonan, or their plane was found. Howland Island was small, barely a dot on the map. Had they missed it by even a few miles, they would have been lost over an endless expanse of blue. The Electra would have eventually run out of fuel, leaving them with only one fate: a crash landing at sea. But was that really what happened? As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into years, the world refused to accept that Amelia Earhart had simply vanished without a trace. Theories began to emerge, some grounded in evidence, others drifting into the realm of conspiracy. The simplest and most widely accepted theory is that Earhart and Noonan simply ran out of fuel and crashed into the Pacific. The ocean is vast, and even modern aircraft have been lost without a trace. If the Electra sank to the ocean floor, it could be resting thousands of feet below the surface, far beyond the reach of most search equipment. Some experts believe new technology, such as deep-sea sonar, could eventually find the wreckage. But after nearly a century, the chances grow slimmer each year. One of the most intriguing possibilities suggests that Earhart and Noonan actually survived the flight, at least for a while. Nikumaroro, formerly Gardner Island, is an uninhabited coral atoll about 350 miles south of Howland Island. In 1940, British colonial officers found a partial human skeleton, along with a woman's shoe, a sextant box, like the one Noonan would have used, and other artifacts. At the time, the bones were dismissed as belonging to a man, but modern forensic analysis suggests they may have been those of a woman of Earhart's height and ancestry. Could Earhart and Noonan have crash-landed there, surviving as castaways? Some theorists believe so, pointing to reports of distress calls that were picked up by radio operators after her disappearance. If true, it would mean she survived the crash, only to die alone on a desolate island. Another theory claims that Earhart and Noonan were captured by the Japanese, who were growing increasingly militaristic in the Pacific at the time. According to this idea, they either crash-landed or were forced down near the Marshall Islands, where they were taken prisoner. Some even claim that Earhart was executed or lived under a new identity. Over the years, supposed eyewitnesses have come forward, saying they saw a white woman in Japanese custody, but no solid evidence has ever been found to confirm this theory. This is one of the more controversial ideas. Was Amelia Earhart actually on a secret mission for the U.S. government? Some theorists suggest she was sent to spy on the Japanese under the guise of her flight. If true, did the government later cover up her fate? There's little evidence to support this, but it remains one of the more sensational possibilities. A more bizarre claim suggests that Earhart survived but chose to disappear. Some believe she returned to the U.S. under a different name and lived the rest of her life in secrecy. A woman named Irene Bolam was once accused of being Earhart in disguise, but she denied it, and no proof ever surfaced. Decades have passed, and yet the mystery of Amelia Earhart's disappearance continues to captivate historians, adventurers, and dreamers. Despite extensive searches, including modern sonar expeditions, her fate remains unknown. Her disappearance left behind a legacy that transcends aviation. She became more than just a pilot. She became a legend, a symbol of the daring spirit of exploration. Even today, new expeditions venture into the Pacific, hoping to find that one missing clue that will finally solve the case. Until then, the vanishing of Amelia Earhart remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of all time. It was Christmas Eve, 1945, in Fayetteville, West Virginia. The Sauter family home was filled with warmth and laughter as George and Jenny Sauter's 10 children celebrated the holiday. Stockings were hung, presents were wrapped, and the air smelled of pine and wood smoke. But before the night was over, tragedy would strike in a way that would haunt the family for generations. At around 12:30 a.m., Jenny Sauter awoke to the sound of the phone ringing. She answered groggily, expecting a relative or friend calling to wish them a Merry Christmas. Instead, she heard a strange woman's voice. The caller asked for someone Jenny didn't recognize. In the background, laughter and clinking glasses suggested a party. When Jenny told the woman she had the wrong number, the caller let out a bizarre laugh before hanging up. Jenny thought nothing of it at first, but as she returned to bed, she noticed something odd. The lights were still on downstairs, and the front door was unlocked. The children who had stayed up late opening presents were supposed to turn everything off before heading to bed. Assuming they had forgotten, Jenny switched off the lights and locked the door, then went back upstairs to sleep. A few minutes later, a loud thud echoed through the house, followed by a rolling sound. Jenny hesitated but didn't hear anything else, so she drifted back to sleep. Around 1:30 a.m., the nightmare began. Smoke filled the hallway. Flames licked the walls. Screaming for her husband, Jenny rushed to wake the children. George Sauter sprang into action, grabbing a bucket of water to fight the fire, but it was spreading too fast. Desperate, he called for his children, 5 of them: Morris, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, and Betty, 5. We're upstairs, trapped in the inferno. George and his older sons tried to reach them, but the staircase was already engulfed in flames. Frantically, George ran outside, intending to climb up to the second-floor window using his ladder, but the ladder was missing. Panicked, he thought of using one of his trucks to climb onto the roof, but neither of them would start, despite working perfectly the day before. Jenny ran to the neighbor's house to call for help, but the phone lines were dead. Another neighbor drove to a nearby tavern to contact the fire department, but it would take them over 7 hours to respond. By the time the firemen arrived, The house was nothing but a pile of smoldering ash. The 5 Sodder children were gone. Authorities ruled it an accident. Faulty wiring had caused the blaze, and the children had perished inside. But the Sodders weren't convinced. The family found it strange that the Christmas tree lights had been on while the fire burned. If it were an electrical fire, wouldn't the power have gone out immediately? Then something even more disturbing emerged. No remains, no bones, no teeth. Nothing were found in the ashes. The fire chief suggested the flames had been so intense that they had completely cremated the children. But George and Jenny knew this wasn't possible. They conducted their own tests, burning animal bones in similar conditions, and they never disintegrated completely. More unsettling details surfaced. A witness came forward, claiming to have seen a man watching the Sodder home from a parked car in the days leading up to the fire. Another person said they saw the missing children peering out of a car window as it sped away from town on the night of the fire. Months later, a letter arrived. It was from a woman in Street Lewis who claimed she had seen the Sodder children living with an unidentified family. Another tip came from Florida. Someone said Martha was in a convent. The Sodders followed every lead, but none led to definitive answers. Then, in 1949, they took a drastic step. George and Jenny had the site of their burned home excavated, hoping to find any trace of their children. Shockingly, a few small bones were uncovered, but they belonged to an adult, not a child. They had been planted there. Someone wanted the Sodders to believe their children had perished in the fire. Years passed, and the family refused to give up. In 1950, they erected a giant billboard along Route 16, displaying the children's faces and pleading for information. The sign stood for nearly 4 decades. Then, in 1967, the most chilling clue of all arrived in the mail. An anonymous envelope postmarked from Kentucky contained a photograph of a young man. Written on the back were the words, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie. A little boys, a 90,132 or 35. The resemblance was striking. He had the same dark eyes, the same angular face as their missing son. But the cryptic message made no sense. The Sodders hired a private investigator and sent him to Kentucky to track down the sender. He was never heard from again. George Sodder spent the rest of his life searching for his children. He died in 1969, still convinced they had been taken. Jenny, heartbroken, continued looking until her death in 1989. She wore black every day, mourning not just the loss of her children, but the absence of truth. Even today, the case remains unsolved. Some believe the children were kidnapped as part of a trafficking ring. Others think the family had angered the wrong people, perhaps due to George's outspoken political views, as he was critical of Mussolini and the fascist movement. Some believe the fire was set intentionally to cover up the abduction. And then there's the photograph. Who sent it? Was it really Louis? If so, why didn't he return home? Or was it just a cruel hoax? The answers burned away with the flames that night, but the questions still remain. The sea was restless that December of 1900, but that was nothing new for the men stationed at the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. Perched on a desolate rock in the North Atlantic, miles from the Scottish mainland, the lighthouse was both a beacon of safety and a prison of isolation. It stood against the fury of the elements, guiding ships through treacherous waters. But when a supply vessel arrived on December 26th, the lighthouse keepers, James Ducat, Thomas Marshall, and Donald MacArthur, were gone. No sign of a struggle, no bodies. Just an empty tower and a series of chilling clues that have baffled investigators for over a century. The first to sense something was wrong was Captain James Harvey of the Hesperus. The lighthouse was supposed to be manned at all times, yet as the ship approached, no one came out to greet them. The usual routine was clear. One of the keepers would descend the rocky stairs to assist with the landing. But the dock was empty. No figures in oilskins bracing against the wind. No movement at all. And the lamp, which should have been burning brightly, was dark. Confused, Harvey ordered a signal flare. Still, no response. The sea churned violently below them, but the land above was silent. The lighthouse stood in eerie stillness. A creeping unease settled over the crew. Joseph Moore, the relief keeper, volunteered to investigate. As he stepped onto the deserted island, the wind howled through the craggy cliffs. He made his way up the stone steps leading to the lighthouse, his boots echoing in the empty silence. The door was locked. He fumbled for the keys, his hands shaking slightly as he forced it open. Inside, the air was stale. The kitchen table was set as if the men had just been sitting down for a meal, plates of untouched food. A chair knocked over slightly as if someone had risen in haste. But there was no sign of the keepers. Their oilskins, thick waterproof coats meant to protect them from the brutal Atlantic storms, were missing, except for one. Donald MacArthur's coat remained, hanging on its usual peg, suggesting he had left in a hurry, unprotected against the elements. Moore climbed the spiraling stairs to the light chamber. The lamp had been carefully cleaned and prepared for the next lighting, indicating that their duties had been performed as usual. There was no blood, no broken glass, no signs of violence, just a lighthouse, eerily empty. Then he found the logbook. The last few entries were deeply unsettling. The first, dated December 12th, noted severe winds, the likes of which I have never seen before in 20 years. This was strange. No storms had been reported in the area at the time. December 13th's entry was more alarming. James Ducat irritable, Thomas Marshall quiet, Donald MacArthur crying. MacArthur was a hardened seaman, known for his tough demeanor. What could have reduced him to tears? December 14th, storm still raging. All three of us praying. God is over all. That was the final log entry. But the storms reported in the journal didn't match official weather records. According to maritime logs, the skies were calm on those days. No one could explain it. Theories began to swirl. Some speculated that a rogue wave had struck the island, washing the keepers out to sea. The island's geography made this seem unlikely, but it was possible if they had all gone out at once to secure equipment. Others believed that madness and paranoia had set in, leading to a violent confrontation between the men. Had one of them killed the others before succumbing to the elements? More bizarre theories surfaced. Whispers of supernatural forces, ghostly apparitions luring the men away, or an ancient curse tied to the island's history. The Flannan Isles had long been shrouded in folklore, rumored to be haunted by spirits and strange creatures of the sea. Some even suggested an otherworldly explanation. Abduction, an unseen force, something beyond human comprehension. But the truth remains unknown. Despite extensive searches, no trace of the three keepers was ever found. The lighthouse was soon manned again, but reports from future keepers spoke of unease, of whispers in the night, of unseen figures moving in the fog. Some claimed the light itself flickered, as if still tended by unseen hands. More than a century later, the mystery of the Flannan Isles lighthouse endures, an unsolved enigma swallowed by the sea. Lars Mittink was an ordinary 28-year-old man from Germany. He had a steady job, a love for soccer, and a close group of friends. In the summer of 2014, he embarked on what was supposed to be a fun vacation in Golden Sands, Bulgaria, a popular tourist destination known for its beaches and nightlife. But what began as a normal getaway soon spiraled into one of the most baffling missing person cases in modern history. Within days, Lars went from enjoying a vacation with friends to sprinting out of an airport in sheer terror, disappearing into the wilderness, never to be seen again. His final moments were captured on security cameras, footage that has left investigators and internet sleuths searching for answers ever since. The mystery began on July 6, 2014, when Lars got into an altercation at a bar. Some reports suggest the fight was over a football rivalry, as Lars was a fan of Werder Bremen, and his attackers may have been supporters of an opposing team. Others claim it was a simple misunderstanding that escalated. Whatever the cause, Lars was punched in the head and later complained of pain in his left ear. The next day, he visited a doctor who diagnosed him with a ruptured eardrum and prescribed cefuroxime, an antibiotic. Due to his injury, he was advised not to fly until he had recovered. His friends, however, had a flight back to Germany the next day. Lars insisted he would be fine and checked into the Hotel Color, a budget hotel in a less touristy part of Varna, planning to fly home later. That was the last time his friends saw him. Over the next 24 hours, Lars' behavior became increasingly erratic. He called his mother, Sandra Mittink, in a panic, whispering that he was being followed and that his life was in danger. When she asked who was after him, he refused to say. Security footage from the Hotel Color shows him pacing the halls late at night, hiding in the elevator and peering around corners as if he was expecting someone to come after him. Around 1 a.m., he left the hotel and vanished into the streets of Varna for several hours. No one knows where he went or what happened during that time. At dawn, he returned to the hotel, checked out abruptly, and took a taxi to Varna Airport. At the airport, Lars visited the medical office for one last checkup before his flight. According to the airport doctor, Lars appeared nervous and agitated. During their conversation, an airport worker entered the room, and Lars suddenly froze. His expression changed to sheer terror. Without warning, he jumped up, shoved his belongings aside, and bolted out of the room. What happened next was captured by security cameras and remains one of the most disturbing pieces of missing person footage ever recorded. Lars sprinted through the airport terminal, past check-in counters, past security, and out the main exit doors. He continued running at full speed through the parking lot, then scaled a barbed wire fence and disappeared into a dense field of wilderness. He left behind his luggage, phone, passport, everything. No one ever saw him again. His mother immediately contacted authorities, pleading for help, but searches of the area turned up nothing. No footprints, no discarded belongings, no body, nothing. As days turned into weeks, theories about his disappearance began circulating. One of the most widely believed explanations is that Lars suffered a psychotic episode, possibly triggered by his injury or the antibiotic cefuroxime, which in rare cases can cause paranoia and hallucinations. His behavior, whispering to his mother, hiding, running in terror, suggests extreme paranoia, which could indicate a sudden mental health crisis. However, this theory does not explain why no trace of him has ever been found. Another theory suggests foul play. Lars himself claimed he was being followed, and some believe he was targeted, perhaps by the same men from the bar fight. Others speculate that he may have been kidnapped or even forced into human trafficking. However, if someone was after him, why would he run away into the wilderness instead of seeking help? Some believe he may have suffered an accident after fleeing the airport. Perhaps he got lost, dehydrated, or fell into a hidden ravine. But despite extensive searches, no remains have ever been discovered. There's also the unsettling possibility that Lars intentionally disappeared. Some theorists suggest he staged his own vanishing and started a new life elsewhere. However, this seems unlikely, as he had no history of wanting to escape his life and was close with his family. Years passed with no new leads. Then, in 2019, a truck driver in Brazil reported meeting a disoriented man who spoke German and bore a resemblance to Lars. By the time authorities looked into it, the man had vanished. In 2020, Lars' mother hired a private investigator and released age-progressed images of what he might look like today. Still, no answers emerged. To this day, the disappearance of Lars Mittink remains a haunting mystery. A normal vacation turned into something terrifying. A man who seemed perfectly fine just days earlier was suddenly running for his life. Was he escaping from a real threat? Or was he running from something in his own mind? The most chilling part of this case is not just that Lars disappeared, it's that we still have no idea why.